Long before brain imaging and neuroscience labs, Carl Jung sat in his Swiss study, contemplating the depths of human consciousness. While his contemporaries built theories on observable behavior, Jung was mapping the invisible territories of the mind, territories that modern neuroscience is only now beginning to explore. What he discovered over a century ago still astounds researchers today. If you've ever wondered why you dream the way you do, or felt pulled towards something you couldn't explain, you're encountering Jung's hidden mind. And if you want to understand how psychology's greatest pioneer saw consciousness long before we had the tools to measure it, I'd love to have you subscribe to this channel. We explore the biggest ideas at the intersection of mind, meaning, and mystery. Carl Jung wasn't just a psychologist. He was an explorer of territories most of his peers refused to enter. While Sigmund Freud mapped the personal unconscious, the repressed memories and forbidden desires buried in each individual, Jung went further. He asked a question that seemed almost reckless at the time. What if the unconscious wasn't just personal? What if something deeper existed beneath the personal layer, something universal, something shared by all human beings regardless of culture or geography? He called this the collective unconscious. Today, neuroscientists studying human brains across different continents are finding patterns Jung predicted. Brain scans reveal that humans everywhere activate the same regions when processing certain emotions, symbols, and archetypal narratives. We see the same patterns in how people respond to mythological figures, heroic journeys, and symbolic death and rebirth. Jung was describing these patterns in 1934, using only introspection, patient listening, and creative intuition. Jung's most radical idea was the archetype. Think of it this way. If the collective unconscious is the ocean, archetypes are the currents. They're universal patterns of behavior, emotion, and imagery that appear across every human culture. The hero, the shadow, the wise old man, the great mother, these aren't invented concepts. They emerge spontaneously in the dreams, myths, and stories of cultures that never contacted each other. A person in a dark library might study ancient texts from Egypt, India, and Mexico, only to discover the same symbolic patterns repeating across thousands of years and thousands of miles. That recognition sparked Jung's insight. Something profound and universal lives in the human psyche. Modern neuroscience now suggests that these patterns reflect the deep structure of how brains evolved to process threat, nurture, wisdom, and transformation. Consider the shadow archetype. Jung described it as the repository of everything the conscious self rejects or denies about itself: our instincts, our raw animal nature, our capacity for cruelty. Most people spend their lives pushing the shadow deeper into the unconscious, but Jung taught that integration was essential. You cannot become whole by denying half of yourself. Neural imaging now shows something Jung intuited. When we suppress difficult emotions or unwanted aspects of ourselves, we're not actually removing them from the brain. They remain active in unconscious neural networks, influencing our behavior, our choices, our relationships, without our awareness. Modern cognitive neuroscience calls this implicit processing. Jung called it shadow work. The mechanism is the same. The brain keeps processing what the conscious mind refuses to acknowledge. Jung also revolutionized how we understand symbols. He rejected the idea that dream symbols had fixed meanings, as if a snake always meant one thing and a house always meant another. Instead, he listened to what symbols meant to the individual dreamer. A snake might represent danger to one person and healing to another. The unconscious, Jung understood, speaks in the language of personal and cultural meaning, not in abstract universal codes. This insight preceded by decades our modern understanding of how the brain encodes meaning through distributed neural networks that are unique to each person's history and experience. Your brain's response to a symbol depends on your memories, your associations, your lived experience. Jung knew this through intuition and thousands of hours of careful listening. Neuroscience now confirms it through imaging and data. One of Jung's most prescient ideas concerns what he called individuation. This is the process of becoming who you truly are beneath the masks you wear for society. Most people, Jung observed, live out scripts written by their family, their culture, their era. They become the dutiful son, the good daughter, the successful professional, without ever asking, who do I actually want to be? What does my true nature demand? Individuation sounds spiritual, almost mystical, but modern neuroscience reveals the brain mechanism beneath it. Your prefrontal cortex, the seat of conscious choice and identity, is constantly in dialogue with deeper limbic and subcortical structures that hold your actual drives, values, and authentic preferences. When you ignore this dialogue and follow only social scripts, you're suppressing neural signals that could guide you toward genuine fulfillment. Jung's patients would often report that when they finally honored their shadow, pursued their authentic desires, or integrated a previously rejected part of themselves, their symptoms dissolved. Anxiety, depression, and compulsive behavior would ease. Modern psychiatry now understands that psychological suffering often stems from a kind of neural civil war, conscious intentions fighting against unconscious drives. Integration brings relief because it restores neural coherence. Jung was deeply interested in dreams, but not in the way pop psychology treats them. He didn't believe dreams were merely the brain's nighttime housekeeping, neurons firing randomly while you sleep. He saw dreams as messages from the unconscious, attempts at communication, attempts at healing. Modern sleep neuroscience has confirmed something Jung suspected. REM sleep, when most vivid dreaming occurs, involves intense activation of emotional processing centers, while rational executive control quiets down. The brain during dreams is trying to process, integrate, and make meaning of emotional material. When Jung asked his patients to stay with their dreams, to dialogue with the dream figures, to paint them and write about them, he was essentially asking them to engage consciously with their brain's own attempts at emotional integration. He called this active imagination. What he was really doing was creating a bridge between conscious and unconscious processing, allowing the person to become aware of and influence the deeper work their brain was already doing. Jung also understood that consciousness isn't a static property. It can expand or contract. It can fragment or integrate. He observed that as people moved through different life stages, the content of their unconscious mind shifted. Young people's dreams, he noticed, often emphasized becoming, ambition, and separation from family. Middle-aged people's dreams grew darker, more introspective, more preoccupied with meaning and mortality. Older people's dreams turned toward integration, wholeness, and preparation for death. Neuroscience now maps this life trajectory onto brain development. The human brain doesn't mature until the mid-20s, it doesn't reach full development until the early 30s, and it undergoes significant changes again in midlife and aging. The very structure of neural processing shifts. Jung saw these changes reflected in how the unconscious mind shifts its preoccupations. He was reading the mind's development long before brain imaging could confirm the brain's biological transformation. Pause for a moment and like this video if you're finding Jung's insights resonating with your own experience of the mind. These connections between depth psychology and modern neuroscience don't get explored often enough, and when they do, people recognize themselves in the description. Jung was also fascinated by what he called synchronicity, meaningful coincidence. Two events occur that seem causally unrelated, yet their conjunction feels significant and timely. Most scientists of his era dismissed this as superstition, but Jung insisted something real was happening, something that violated our usual sense of cause and effect, but was nonetheless genuine. Modern neuroscience can't fully explain synchronicity yet, but it reveals something Jung intuited. Your brain is constantly scanning for patterns, making associations, and finding meaning in apparent randomness. Your unconscious is pattern matching in ways your conscious mind never fully grasps. Sometimes a coincidence that feels meaningful actually reflects your brain's own preparedness, your unconscious awareness, your brain having already registered something your conscious mind hasn't yet articulated. Jung also pioneered the study of what he called complexes, clusters of emotionally charged thoughts, images, and memories organized around a core theme. A mother complex, a power complex, an inferiority complex. These aren't psychoanalytic inventions, they're actual patterns of neural activation. Modern neuroscience reveals that your brain does indeed organize information into networks centered on emotionally significant themes. Activate one element of the complex, and the entire network activates. Jung saw this pattern operating in behavior and speech long before we had the neural imaging to confirm it. What makes Jung's work so remarkable is not just that he was right, but that he was right for the right reasons. He wasn't guessing blindly. He was working from meticulous observation of human psychology. He listened to thousands of hours of patient material. He analyzed his own dreams. He studied myths and symbols across cultures. He created word association tests that measured the emotional charge of different concepts, a primitive but genuine measure of what neuroscientists now detect with fMRI scanners. Jung also understood something crucial about the nature of psychological truth. The unconscious, he insisted, communicates through symbols, metaphors, and narratives, not through literal propositions. When your unconscious mind sends you a dream or generates a symptom, it's not trying to explain itself in logical language. It's showing you something through image and emotion. This mode of communication is not inferior to rational language. It's a different kind of knowledge entirely. Modern neuroscience is beginning to map this distinction. The left hemisphere specializes in literal, logical, sequential processing. The right hemisphere specializes in metaphor, emotion, spatial relationships, and holistic pattern recognition. Jung's insistence on honoring symbolic and emotional knowledge as valid ways of knowing the mind now looks like an early recognition of hemispheric specialization. He was defending the right hemisphere's way of knowing against a scientific establishment that recognized only left hemisphere rationality. One of Jung's most misunderstood contributions is his interest in alchemy and Eastern philosophy. Critics dismissed these as distractions from his psychological work. But Jung understood that alchemical texts contained encoded descriptions of psychological processes. The alchemist's quest to transform base metal into gold was actually a metaphor for psychological transformation, for turning the lead of unconscious material into the gold of conscious integration. This wasn't metaphor for its own sake. Jung was reading these ancient texts as descriptions of inner processes that were real, that happened in the human psyche, whether alchemists understood the mechanism or not. Modern psychology might describe these processes in terms of neural integration and reward prediction, but the experiences Jung found encoded in alchemical symbolism are genuine transformative processes that still occur in the human brain today. Jung also recognized that the unconscious isn't opposed to consciousness. It's not a dark force to be conquered. It's an intelligent system, evolved over millions of years, containing vast knowledge that consciousness alone cannot access. When you dream, when you have an intuition, when you feel pulled towards something without knowing why, that's the unconscious intelligence communicating. It's not less intelligent than conscious thought. It's differently intelligent. Functional neuroimaging shows that unconscious processing is extraordinarily sophisticated. Your brain processes far more information unconsciously than consciously. The vast majority of your neural activity remains inaccessible to awareness, and this unconscious processing often makes better decisions than conscious deliberation. Jung's respect for unconscious intelligence was neurologically sound, even though he couldn't have known the mechanism. Consider how Jung approached therapy. He didn't push his interpretations onto patients. He created conditions for the unconscious to speak, and he listened with radical respect for what emerged. He asked questions, not to impose meaning, but to help the patient discover their own meaning. This wasn't naive passivity. It was based on a deep trust in the mind's own self-healing capacities. Modern trauma neuroscience has validated this approach. The brain that has been hurt by trauma needs not someone's interpretation imposed from outside, but conditions that allow it to safely process and integrate what happened. Jung's intuitive respect for the patient's unconscious wisdom was actually sound neurobiology. When you truly listen to another person's unconscious material without judgment, you activate their capacity for self-healing. Jung died in 1961. He didn't live to see PET scans or fMRI machines. He didn't see neural maps of the default mode network or evidence of how emotion and cognition are fundamentally integrated throughout the brain, or confirmation that the brain continues developing through the entire lifespan. Yet almost everything he intuited about consciousness has been confirmed or is being actively investigated by contemporary neuroscience. What did Jung know that we're only now beginning to see? He knew that consciousness is far more complex and mysterious than the mechanical models of his era allowed. He knew that the unconscious isn't primitive or stupid. He knew that meaning, symbols, and emotion aren't decorations on top of brain function. They're central to how the brain actually works. He knew that becoming fully human requires integration of conscious and unconscious, rational and emotional, personal and collective dimensions of mind. Most importantly, Jung knew that the mind is fundamentally self-organizing and self-healing when given the right conditions. He knew that symptoms aren't just problems to be eliminated, they're communications, attempts by the whole person to achieve balance or wholeness. Modern neuroscience increasingly confirms that health is a state of integration, not the absence of difficult material. The question Jung poses to us now is the same one he posed to his patients. Are you becoming who you truly are? Are you listening to the unconscious intelligence within you? Are you integrating the parts of yourself you find difficult? Are you honoring your dreams, your intuitions, your emotions as valid sources of knowledge about reality? These aren't just psychological questions anymore. They're neurobiological questions. Your brain is designed for integration. Your unconscious mind is trying to communicate with you constantly. The question is whether you'll listen. If this exploration of Jung and consciousness has resonated with you, I'd deeply appreciate it if you'd subscribe to the channel. We'll continue exploring the mysteries of mind together, looking at what the great thinkers knew and what neuroscience is confirming. Before you go, I'd love to hear from you. What dreams or intuitions have you experienced that your conscious mind couldn't quite explain? What part of yourself have you been reluctant to integrate? Drop a comment below. Your reflection might spark insight for others watching. Thank you for exploring the hidden mind with me today.